Vince, the other day, when he made his comments once again about Corcoran, if you hadn't been on the stage, I'm not sure he would have said, look, this is my feeling. I'm not a doctor. I think he could really understand that there's people who disagree with him. All right, so let's move on. As a country, what's become clearer and clearer over the last 2 weeks is the pandemic is affecting cities very, very differently. You have New York, you have Detroit, Chicago a bit, Boston really struggled. My own institution had to close for beds for a few hours over the weekend. As a country, what's become clearer and clearer over New York, Detroit, Boston, how is it, do you think those cities are doing?
Given the circumstances and the challenge that they have been thrust upon them, Howard, I think they're doing really very, very well. I think what people don't appreciate, unless you live through it, is what it means during that critical period when you transition from the linear to the exponential phase of an outbreak. If you have the opportunity to be able to do containment before you have to essentially switch over to mitigation, and you have the capability, the resources, and the luck to be able to put it down before it exponentially expands, then you're going to be in good shape. But if you're in a situation like New York, we're given a lot of aspects of the city, the dense population, the subway system and things like that. And then all of a sudden you find out you're just playing catch up. The way they handled it, given the stress on them, I think was quite admirable. I think Governor Cuomo has done a really, really good job under amazingly difficult circumstances. Hopefully, and this is one of the things that we really feel that we need to stay ahead of, is as other metropolitan areas start to be getting challenged with the possibility of that exponential increase, that they implement the resources that they have to contain it. I think the mitigation that we're going through, the idea that we said the entire country should have a baseline level of following the guidelines of physical separation, even if they have not yet had a major spike, was really an important recommendation. And thank goodness, many locales have done that. And I think that's the reason why they're in good shape. In other words, to almost stay a step or two ahead. Don't wait until you get into the exponential phase to mitigate. Mitigate before you get there. And that's why I think what you're going to see, although I'm always very conservative in my cautious optimism, I think we're going to start to see soon, within the next week or so, kind of a plateauing out and a turn around. We got to be cautious. Now we're going to start seeing that. The real challenge is if we do then try, which everybody's talking about now, to get back to some degree of normality, not turning a light switch on and off. That's not going to happen. But some degree of normality. We better make sure that we very aggressively and vigorously do not allow the resurgence of a case or 2 or 3 or 10 or 20 get out of hand. We've got to jump all over that so we don't have, recurrent peaks, because if we do that, we're just going to be playing a sawtooth game instead of one and down, which is what we want to do.
Yeah, I was very proud of my profession, in part because of Governor Cuomo and other governors when last week it really became clear that places were going to have to share ventilators, that you couldn't have some place that really had many ventilators saved for the exponential growth, whereas New York was suffering. I was very impressed with Seattle's donation back to other places, and I think that took longer than I had hoped, but I think at least from the ventilator standpoint, I have more faith that there's a sufficient number of the exponential growth, whereas New York was suffering. It's very impressive. Tony, do you think Seattle policy will be other places? That took longer than I had hoped, but I think at least from the ventilator standpoint, I have a more faith that this should save the United States from New York roads. New York was suffering. It's very impressive. Tony, do you think Seattle policy will be other places? That took longer than I had hoped, but I think at least from the ventilator standpoint, I have a more faith that this should save the United States from New York roads. New York was suffering. It's very impressive. Tony, do you think Seattle policy will be other places?
I think we're getting it now, and people realize that the sacrifice that you do very disrupting your normal, very severely your normal social interaction is going to pay off in a very positive way in the end. So the short answer to your question, Howard, is I don't think it's absolutely necessary that we're going to see spikes in every metropolitan area.
Now, as you know, a number of journals, including Jama, published some papers almost 5 or 6 weeks ago about asymptomatic spread. The data were limited, but it was clear that there was a fair number of scientific reports that it was occurring. And then obviously the CDC's change on masks the past few days. I was surprised it took 4 or 5 weeks for the CDC to make that change. I recognize there were concerns about shortages of masks, although clearly people have become very creative in how they're doing it. Can you talk a little bit about the change and the importance of this mask wearing that the CDC is recommending?
Yeah, that's a really good question. That delay, driven by exactly what you said, was we were being driven by two opposing forces. A lot of information coming in that people who really needed masks, the healthcare workers who were putting their lives on the line every day, were saying we don't have enough PPE, including masks. And then the possibility that we're saying we want more broad community use of masks. But now the idea of being creative and fashioning masks in a way that you don't take away from the N95 and the other surgical masks that people need, I think is a good thing. It's a good thing for several reasons. When people are trying to get out into society and gradually stepping towards normality, even though masks are not perfect, and I spend time at the task force meetings repeating, saying, don't let perfect be the enemy of the good. You don't want 100% protected. The mask generally is used, it's used for 2 reasons, but one of the most prevailing reasons is if you do not know that you are wearing a mask will go a long way to prevent you from infecting somebody else. It's not 100% in protecting you, but it's certainly if you wear a mask and someone else wears a mask in a situation where you really cannot guarantee that you can maintain a 6-foot distance, I think that would be quite contributory to the decrease in spread, not to mention, the alleviation of some anxiety on the people. You don't want to have false confidence, but I think it goes a long way. We're having debates about how aggressively we might want to implement that. One of the things that we're trying to do is to maybe test those masks. The Hanes company that makes underwear and other things is able to really crack out millions of masks. And if we can get that out and show by some simple experiments the ability or not to trap virus in droplets in that, we may be able to get that more widely distributed. I, for one, am in favor of that. I think that's something we should be doing.
Well, it's interesting. Hindsight is always helpful, but in London have so struggled is they have robust metros and underground subways, and they probably had perfect subway asymptomatic spread. Those 3 cities have really struggled. Now there's exceptions, Tokyo, Berlin. Those 3 cities have really, really struggled the last few weeks.
That's for sure.
Tony, I think what I read yesterday, 270 different randomized trials, 300 different randomized trials, 50 different agents. Anything new that you've read or has crossed your desk, or still too soon about any of the results from clinical trials?
It's all still too soon, Howard. You know, I think what we might start seeing is that when randomized controlled trials actually start getting results, you know, we all like to see a positive result, but one of the advantages of doing a randomized trial is that if you find something that doesn't work, just get it off the table quickly and move on to the next one. And that's the reason why, as much as I completely understand, I've been through this, I've been through this before, many years ago, during the early years of HIV, when you had no therapy at all. There was tuition between doing a trial and actually just giving something to someone. It becomes easy to do when you have a drug that's approved for another indication, because you can do an off-label use. But I would hope that off-label uses don't prevent us from continuing to do the randomized controlled trials. We have to do them. So far, in short answer to your question, Howard, no results yet on anything. But it will be soon, as you'll know as you see papers coming in. It will be soon.
I mean, I think the other thing most of our listeners recognize, a successful clinical trial will reduce mortality, save them. That's the number needed to treat a 5, or 10, or 15, or 20. It's not going to cure the disease. It's not going to cure the disease.
Right.
There may be successful trials, but there's not going to be a dramatic reduction in mortality. That would be a surprise.
It would surprise me greatly. It really would. It really would. You know, the thing that's interesting that, you know, obviously relates a bit to therapeutic intervention, Howard, is that the pathogenesis of this disease just fascinates me. I mean, I don't have a lot of time to look up at the ceiling at night because I don't sleep that much, but the thing, as a person whose research career has been focused on the pathogenic mechanisms of HIV disease, you know, the idea that you can have somebody who is sitting down, getting in his office, then feeling sick, getting febrile, go home, and febrile for 5, 6, 7 days, and then all of a sudden they crash, and they crash over a few hours. They go from feeling okay but febrile and achy to all of a sudden having difficulty breathing, oxac goes down, tachypnea, bingo, they have infiltrates that get into it. What the mechanism of that is, you know, we looked at some autopsy cases, you know, something that even looks a little bit like DIC as opposed to inflammatory infiltrate. I have to be humble and say, I don't know what's going on there, but boy, we need to find that out, because unless you know what the pathogenic mechanism is, it's going to be tough to do intervention.
Yeah, there's been tremendous speculation both about that and the lack of infection, symptomatic infection in children. They may be asymptomatic carriers, but they're clearly not particularly symptomatic. Greg Poland was on a week or so ago. Tony, and I know you know he's a vaccinologist who really is very schooled in the different types of vaccines. He wasn't certain we were trying to develop the correct vaccine, that there were different elements to attack. Could you comment on that?
I'm not sure what he meant, Howard. Was he a little bit more specific about that?
Yeah, he said current vaccine candidate is the S protein, drives Th2 response, and he was wondering if it should be the SM protein. I'm not sure about the specifics beyond that. Are there different types of vaccines being tried?
You know, yes, but they're mostly different platforms. I think they're all going for the same spike protein. Depending upon the platform that you're in, you may get more of a T cell response or more of a antibody response. So there are a few going on. You know, the one we have is an mRNA one that's coming out of NIH, but there are other potentially good ones that are already starting in clinical trials. The bottom line, we do not know the correlate of one unit that's coming out of NIH, but there are other potentially good animal models already starting in clinical trials. The bottom line, we do know that certain responses are the things that are the critical endpoints that we say. That's always the case with vaccines. You know, you always have a pretty clear cut because your responses are the things that are the critical endpoints that we say. That's always the case with vaccines. it's always more difficult to measure T-cell responses and what role they have in the control of infection. So, Greg's got a point. There are different approaches. I think we're just going to have to see how it works out with the vaccines that we have. But the good thing is we got a bunch of candidates using different platforms. mRNA, DNA, proteins, viral vectors, clearly good viral vectors.
Convalescent plasma serology has surfaced. We have published a small case series, 100-year time-honored approach to treatment. And it's a combination both as a therapy in terms of convalescent plasma, but large serology studies will tell us, actually give us more information about incidence and prevalence. Do you have any sense of what's going to happen with either it as therapy or as markers for people who've been infected and haven't been infected? Can you see that playing a role as we try to get back to normalcy?
Okay, so actually two questions.
Right,
so
that's right.
So let me take them separately. The idea about convalescent plasma or even hyperimmune IG is clearly a lot of enthusiasm. We have decades, if not a century or more. That's the birth of infectious diseases in immunology, as you know, how it comes from passive transfer of antibodies. So that's at least a good approach that's worth going. And trials are underway. Hopefully, we'll get some data soon on that. It might be a good way of therapy. The idea about serology and serosurveillance is going to play a major role in doing a framework for getting back to normal. I was spent until the wee hours last night in the Roosevelt Room of the West Wing of the White House with my colleagues on the task force, trying to integrate the public health issues into the practicality of, after 30 days, the extension of the guidelines for 30 days till the end of April. What are the kind of things you have to have in place to safely and carefully march towards some sort of normality? And clearly one of the things is to get a feel for what the penetrance of infection was and who out there has been infected, recovered, and is now not vulnerable. Because those are the people that when you put them back to particularly critical infrastructure jobs, that you worry less about them driving an outbreak than those who, in fact, are antibody negative and very likely have never been exposed. So you really want to get a good feel for countrywide where we are, and specifically in different areas, different districts, different cities. The way we're going to do that is, first of all, we got to get, and we do have antibody tests that can quickly be done, cheaply get a result right away. But we got to validate them first. And the reason is there have been some unfortunate international experience where certain countries, no naming who they are, I don't want to embarrass them, have ordered millions of these antibody tests from another country only to find that they don't work. So when you hear us talking about having to validate these tests, that's absolutely critical. Otherwise, you'll go down a path that will be very misleading.
Yeah, it would seem like in this, hopefully this march to normalcy, understanding who's been infected and who hasn't will be critically important. Tony, based upon previous coronavirus outbreaks, what's the assumption about how long immunity will last if someone's been infected?
It hasn't been looked at as carefully as we would have liked now to have looked at it. Yeah. But the way, when you get into a situation like this, as you and I have said so many times, you got to act on evidence-based. But sometimes when you don't have the real-time evidence, you got to act on historical-based. And generally, we know with infections like this, that at least for a reasonable period of time, you're going to have antibody levels that'll be protected. Now, the problem is that, there were about six coronaviruses that were out there that are responsible for, 10, 15 to 30% of the common colds that we see. So if a person gets infected with coronavirus A and then gets reinfected with the coronavirus, it may be coronavirus B. But right now, we don't think that this is mutating to the point of being very different. So we're making an assumption, which I think is a reasonable assumption, that this virus is not changing very much. And if we get infected in February and March and recover, that next September, October, that the person who's infected, I believe, is going to be protected. We don't know 100% for sure, but I think that's a reasonable assumption.
Right. That was actually my next question, Tony, because you see a lot more data than virtually anyone in the world. I assume some laboratories do. Has there been any evidence about mutation in the virus?
Well, it's an RNA virus, so it's going to mutation.
All right.
Whether mutations are functionally relevant in the sense of changing any recognized function, transmissibility, virulence, or whatever, there's no evidence of that right now.
Now, just before you came on, Josh Sharfstein and I released an editorial that called for a huge investment in the public health service, that we don't really have the capacity at the moment to test, track, trace, and quarantine. We recommended medical students, that's less critical. We need a huge investment in the public health service. Tony, how do we get back to normalcy where we can identify cases as they develop and isolate those individuals so we don't have to go back to social distancing?
You know, that's a great question and a great point, Howard, because even when I was in medical school, my phenomenal mentors like Walsh McDermott and some of the giants in public health, when I was at Cornell Medical School, were telling me that the public health infrastructure in the country, because we've done so well in containing infectious diseases, has had the perverse effect of diminishing the capabilities of the local public health infrastructure in the country. And it hasn't gotten any better. It's actually got a little bit worse as you go along. And because we're so good at what we do, and we have vaccines and we have therapeutics, and we've handled outbreaks reasonably well, we've let it slip. Boy, if this should be a lesson for the future, I hope that when we get out of this, which we will, that we do take a really good look at the long-term investments in the future for the public health infrastructure and the public health service itself, but mostly the state and local public health, because we have a habit of when we get over a challenge, we say, okay, let's move on to the current problem. Something like this, we should never, ever be in a position of getting hit like this and have to scramble to respond again. I mean, this is historic. I mean,